of the Places Will Go show with your hosts, Richie and Mark. Now, today, we really do have another brilliant guest who leads the marketing charge of one of the UK's most well-known banks, HSBC. Well, hey, good morning and welcome, Becky.
Good morning, Richie. It's great to be here. Thank you.
No, the pleasure is all ours. And look, I'm really excited to have you on because me and Mark both had a little bit of our heydays in the bank, as well as we call it. And I certainly love what the brand stands for. And of course, you're a big part to play in that. Now, let me give everybody a little bit of background about Becky. So Becky is the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of HSBC UK, which is an absolutely huge job and also includes M&S Bank and First Direct. So she really has to deal with the complexities of a portfolio play in addition to the red hexagon. Now, one of the things that Becky really focuses on when it comes to brands is all around how we deliver exceptional customer experience and deliver a branded experience, which I'm sure we'll get onto as well. And one of the campaigns that I think of late, which I've really noted, was the one around controlling the nature of financial abuse, which was super impactful as a social campaign. And I'd love to dive into that a little bit as well, Becky, as we go through the twists and turns of your journey. Before this, she also had a global role. She was the global head of customer marketing for HSBC's retail and wealth management division. So she's got a huge amount of international experience as well. And prior to that, prior to her HSBC days, she'd worked at Boots, Barclays, and the Abbey. And finally, she also went to Newcastle Uni. So I'm sure she knows a thing or two about partying as well. But it's really great because I spent a lot of time in Carlisle on the borders, so know Newcastle well as well. But hey, there we go. Amazing to have you on, Becky. Really can't wait to get stuck in. I'm going to hand over to Mark for the first question.
Thanks, Richie. Obviously, you've stereotyped everybody from Newcastle University, but I doubt they have an issue with that. Most cliches are true. But Becky, fantastic to have you on the show. I am reminiscing 2010 to 2012 at HSBC, and that's where, of course, I met Richie, so I'm very grateful for that. You lasted a little bit longer than me. But anyway, let's move on from that. So it's July the 1st.
Terrifying.
Half 2022 is done. So tell us where you're up to. So how's the first half of the year been, and how are you shaping up for the second half of the year?
The first half has been slightly bonkers, is probably a polite way to put it. And it's amazing the number of people I speak to, both within the bank, the industry, and outside, that says that like the first half of this year seems to have been more crazy than usual. And I haven't quite pinpointed why that is as yet. But some really exciting stuff going on. I think as we have started to come out of the pandemic, there was a lot of excitement, a lot of hope, a lot of energy. And now as we're looking into H2, it was tempered slightly around the economic position that we're in, and just seeing a little less confidence through sort of businesses and consumers as we face into the sort of like the economic tightening that's going on. So I think it might be a game of two halves for 2022 as we head into the second half. The first half for us though has been I say really exciting. Really, you've already touched on it, Richie. To be able to deliver the work around safe spaces has been hugely exciting, and to actually see how that's been picked up and how we're helping to open up a conversation about something that often isn't talked about. Is phenomenally satisfying for me and for the team, and it's not just our marketing team that have done that. We have done the communication with some really fantastic creative work with our partners, but there's a huge amount of substance that sits behind that with our financial inclusion team, who really do the hard yards around actually making sure that when we talk about things like safe spaces, we can put our money where our mouth is, and we can really help people, so that our branches are equipped to do that, our colleagues are equipped to support, and that we've really got the systems and processes in place to be able to help people when they really need help most.
Wow, brilliant. And Becky, you know, the way that you surmised with the phrase "the tale of two halves of the year," that's absolutely true. And as a CMO, how do you deal with that? I mean, how are you coping, both on a personal level and professional?
I think it's really interesting. We talk a lot about agile and agile processes. I think for me, agile is all about agility of your mindset and being able to adapt. And actually, in the role that I have, that's critical. So We are still very focused on growth, very focused on customer and improving our customer experiences, and that's a thread that we will have ongoing over multiple years. But equally, we need to be able to adapt and flex our marketing strategies to really make sure that we're focusing on unlocking the right opportunities at the right time. So for me, I try to, an ex-boss of mine used to talk about holding things lightly. We have to have a plan, we have to know where we're going, but we have to hold things lightly and make sure that we can adapt to unlock opportunities as they arise, whilst also having a clear sense of the broad direction that we're going in. So for me, I try to not hang on too tightly, to be open to different options, and to then see how best we can make them work. And I think that's how I sort of try and cling tenaciously to my sanity as we go through. I think the really challenging part is particularly in marketing, where we have some very, very creative people, is when there's a lot of emotion and energy expended in developing and creating something. To then say we're pivoting to something else is an incredibly hard thing to do, quite an emotional thing to actually step away from. And I think that's something that I need to be very mindful of with the team that I lead, around when we are being adaptive and agile. That can actually also be really hard for people to move on and look at something different.
Becky, what's interesting is already what's emerging. You're a financial services thoroughbred. It's a hard industry, but extremely rewarding, partly because it's complex. But you've already talked about holding things lightly, about ambiguity, about clinging to my sanity, about emotions and creativity, which is sort of a bit out of context with financial services in some ways. So I suppose how do you hold that space and provide the cover for your team in an organization, in a sector which doesn't, it's pretty serious and doesn't like things to be ambiguous?
Yeah, I think you can often look at this. There's quite a difference between some of the talent that we have within the marketing teams and in other functions of the business, as you will know, both of you. I think that the critical thing for me is I was an economist at heart, grew up wanting to be an economist. So as well as the creative side of marketing, I like numbers, which is probably a good thing working in a bank, and I feel the need to be able to explain things in terms of, this is the outcome, this is the value it's going to add, this is how we're going to unlock value. So I think that's how I try and bridge some of that personally, and what I try to do with my team. I also spent nearly 3 years running one of the P&Ls, the current account P&L in HSBC. So, and I think that was invaluable in terms of my ability to understand the drivers of the business and be able to then tie what we're doing in terms of our marketing investment back into the way that we make money, the way that we don't, and so on. So so those are some of the things that I have in my toolkit that helps me. I do think that financial services is interesting in that it does tend to have a more one-dimensional view of what marketing is than some other industries. Tends to have a bigger focus on marketing being marketing communications. And I guess that's part of my crusade to go, marketing is a very, very broad church. And actually we have lots of marketeers actually scattered around our business. They just might not call themselves that. So trying to build that culture of understanding our customers and delivering things and creating things that customers want and need, that's all part of marketing, really. What we call a department or a particular team is almost irrelevant as long as we can all work across all of that.
Oh, Becky, music to my ears. Keep drumming that drum. It is one of the biggest bugbears that I guess us as marketers really do have, in terms of the limited scope that other people put us in their own little box in their minds, when it's so not true. But you sparked so many thoughts as you just spoke about that last answer there. I mean, one predominantly being around an economist turned into a marketer is a pretty rare breed in many ways. I mean, but it does sort of start to make sense when you elaborate across the different skill sets that you've garnered, and then being able to bring it back to the ultimate commerciality of our industry. So to me, one is, how did you make a pivot move, or the thought about how did you get into the industry, once from being an economist? And then two, if I may ask for a cheeky second question at the same time, is what are the most valuable skill set that you think a modern marketer needs to have, particularly when it comes to being able to be, au fait in the boardroom, to be able to then justify what we do?
Let me take your second question first, if I can, and then we'll go to the how did I get from being an economist. I think this is there's a number of capabilities and skills that I think are really, really important. I'm going to start with resilience. I think as a marketer, you have to be resilient. So much of what we do, show, talk to has an emotion. We're deliberately building things that people will have an emotional response to for our customers, for our audiences. Therefore, we can't be surprised when we get an emotional response from our colleagues across the business in the boardroom. Therefore, I think resilience to understand the difference between sort of fact and opinion and how you deal with that is really, really critical. So I would put that as it's a critical part of don't take it personally, because actually you're trying to elicit an emotional reaction. Sometimes you don't get the emotional reaction you want, but be aware that that's what you're trying to do. I think the other piece for me is actually for skill sets for marketers is increasingly with being able to blend creativity, and I'm not just talking about creating great communications or things that look great. I'm talking about creativity in its broadest sense and an ability to join the dots with a solid commercial understanding of how businesses operate, plus a sort of an interest in human psychology. I think for me, those are the things that come together to make a great marketer. None of those things are easy to master on their own, and I think that's and it frustrates me sometimes when everybody thinks they can do marketing because when you think about all those four things together, and some of the great marketers that we see, you know, they've got all of those things, and that ain't easy. So
for sure. And my second question, pivoting in.
So slightly convoluted story, but I very strangely grew up very much wanting to be an economist, studied economics at GCSE at A-level, and had ambitions to genuinely go and be an economist, probably slightly odd for a lass in Yorkshire growing up wanting to be an economist. People who knew me better than me said, we don't actually think, Bex, that you really enjoy it. Because you've probably gathered already, I'm reasonably extrovert in my character. But I went to university, I studied economics, but I did economics with management and German. Because again, I was always I've got a real Germanophile in terms of, I love the way Germans think, work, etc. And so went to university and applied for straight economist jobs, didn't get it. You know, frankly, it was in the day there, I was female, I wasn't Oxbridge, and there was very little likelihood of me getting some of these top economist jobs. But I had a brilliant opportunity with Barclays on their grad program, and they said to me, yes, what we will let you do, because I spoke to them about it, is as long as you do the standard program, we'll let you go and do a year as an economist working in our group economics division, which nobody had done before. And I said, as long as you create the placement, we will let you do it. So I said, right, bang on, I'll give that a go. So I spoke to the chief economist, deputy chief economist, got a placement working as a financial economist in the group economics division, did it for a year, worked with some amazing people. But prior to that, I'd done a year in a retail branch and a year in a corporate branch, and I absolutely loved the interaction with customers, with people, and realised that working in the year with the economics team, that sitting thinking great thoughts was just not where I was going to excel and be happy. And so I came out of my third year of my grad program going, I have no idea what I want to do now, but I know it's not being an economist. And my now husband, then boyfriend, had spent a year out in Africa, had come back and got a permanent role with Barclays up in their Coventry campus. And I thought, you know, we've been apart for a while, I'll go and just see if there's anything interesting up in and talk to a few people up in Coventry for my last placement, and had an amazing conversation with a chap who was leading a team called Delivery Channel Development, and that was the team that were launching PC banking. Barclays was the first major high street bank to launch banking on your computer at home, when we charged people for the privilege of us sending them floppy disks to install. And I joined that team, took a permanent role in that team a few months later. And that's what really got me. I was working on the launch plans, go-to-market plans, some of the testing plans. It was a very small team. We were able to, it was a little like a guerrilla operation. It was brilliant. On the edge, we were able to do so much more. And I absolutely loved it. And that's what got me into this interest in what do consumers do? How do you respond to it? How can you build great experiences? How can you use technology to do that? And it was completely fortuitous.
Wow.
Long story, sorry.
Amazing.
No. I always sort of, it feels like it was destiny in a manner of speaking. I mean, just as a little side note, it's a little bit spooky. I did economics GCSE, economics A-level, economics degree, was destined for a job in finance, had a graduate job in finance disappears in a puff of smoke with a merger. And I was made redundant before I'd even started, saved probably a rather average career there. And so sort of fell into marketing. So often the case, but slightly spooky, I have to say.
Oh, it is better, even smaller world, Mark.
but there we go. Well, you've talked about some of the things that have shaped you, I suppose, and we're getting a flavour for what makes you tick. And I suspect when you talk to some of the characteristics of what makes a good marketer, that's probably what you've got, and particularly the blend of commercial and creative and resilience. But if we rewind back, can you put your finger on some of the things that have really shaped you as a person?
Yes. Me as a person, I go right back to my dad was a university lecturer, so was curious and would chat to anybody. And I think that interest in people and desire to learn and understand is something that has shaped me. And then he from a very early age used to play a game with us called Fact or Opinion, which I still do. Used to play with my kids when they were young, around, how do you understand the difference between what's actually a fact, what's real, and what's somebody's view, and they're all valid, but you have to understand the difference. So I think that's really shaped me and how I look at things. In terms of my career, I left Barclays to go to a life assurer after about 5 years. And I'd had the most amazing 5 years at Barclays, and it was a bigger job in a smaller company. And I got there, and within about 2 weeks realised I'd really not made a very good decision. So that's one of those moments where you go, right, what do I do now? This is not where I want to be. This is not the right fit for me. I sort of was leading an e-commerce, setting up and leading an e-commerce team, and I felt a huge sense of responsibility about a team that I was establishing as well, and really feeling that I wasn't wanting to be there long term. So what I did is I made the decision was we were launching stakeholder pensions online and building out that proposition. So my view is I will stay and deliver that and make sure that I've delivered it, and once that's done, then I look to move on. And that's what I did. But it was really an organization that the cultural fit was so wrong. And that's one of the biggest learns I've had, is that culturally you need to fit. And we talked a little bit before we came on air around, I've been HSBC for longer than I've been anywhere. I've done 3 different jobs, but HSBC is such a diverse organization that it's you can find places that you feel that you fit more than others. So I think that's quite interesting. Equally, I think that it's massive. Made it very clear to me it's massively important who I'm working with and for as well. So that's always critical. So the experience that I had with Botanic was one that was a real learn that, do your due diligence on culture. Culture is so important in terms of how you fit in. Other key things that have really shaped me is my time at Abbey. I worked for a chap named Ambrose McGinn, who seemed to have huge faith in me. And I think that was a defining moment for me, that I went in to start doing a job, and that job sort of doubled in size and then doubled again over a relatively short period. And I was still very young. And having somebody have that belief in you and visibly have that belief in you is really a defining moment. And then I actually went through some really difficult times because Abbey had a number of challenges, lots of big changes, and that meant a lot of change for me personally. And again, I learned how not to do significant change, redundancy programs, things like that, through some of the experience that I had of doing that for the first time, and learned a huge amount from that, and would reflect on that in terms of being one of the toughest parts of my career, but probably one of the parts that I learned the most around how to approach things in a different way. And then, I mean, going into different industries as well, I got to a point with Abbey Santander that I didn't want to be carried out of sort of financial services in a box. I wanted to experience something different. And so I went into publishing because it was an industry that was really experimenting and investing in digital technology, front to back, actually, not just sort of front end. So that was fascinating, and working with journalists was another defining moment. And again, my time at Boots. So if I look at it, there's kind of actually the steady states have been really enjoyable and have achieved lots, but the defining moments and where I've learned most have been the unsteady states, and in areas where I have been having to learn, having to seek to understand, having to listen, to try and work out what I need to do. So sorry, again, long answer.
I mean, no, but Becky, I mean, it's remarkable through the, to be able to take the good moments through what was obviously very turbulent times at that moment. And, one of the things that you picked up on that many people ask me, and I think it was when you were working in that life insurer, when you just knew it wasn't a fit. I mean, it's just one of those things. And you probably had to make some tough decisions about how you stayed, when you stayed, how long you stayed, and all those various things. Do you think in today's context, if someone is in a similar position, what would your advice be in terms of, on the one hand, having the staying power, and people then being obviously very nervous about what it looks like on your CV and all the rest of it, versus actually taking your career in your own hands and maybe making a move faster?
I think as long as you have a clear story and reason, and you've learned from it that you should do the right thing and do the right thing for you. I've actually had a conversation with an ex-colleague around that quite recently, which gave him exactly that view, is actually, if you can go to a potential future employer and say, this is what happened, this is what I did, this is what I learned, and this is what I feel about it now, and have a clear reason for it, then I think, absolutely you should make a move. I think the other thing that I've always tried to hold myself to is, and I haven't always done it, is try and run towards things rather than away. So make sure you're making a positive decision, because the grass isn't always green. So that kind of combination of make sure you try to run towards something positive, but don't stay because you're worried that somebody will go, well, I've only had 15 months on or I've only had 5 months on my CV. If the context is there and you can clearly articulate and understand the context and explain it, then absolutely you should make that move. Don't be miserable. Life's too short.
I think that's great advice, and I think there will be many people because people are meeting less other people to join companies now. It's harder to really pick up all the cues. But I'm just going to say I love the fact or opinion game. I might think about introducing that, because of course teenagers and social media, everything's a fact if it appeals to them. Yeah. Anyway, now you said something interesting about the increasing use of technology to create customer experiences, and I know how seriously HSBC takes customer experience. So can you tell us a little bit about how technology is fusing into what you're doing?
So, I mean, it's one of those really interesting things. We still talk about technology and digital as if it's sort of something different, and it's absolutely woven into our day-to-day lives and what we're doing. So I scratch my head a bit when we have these conversations sometimes, because none of us leave our digital minds and our digital devices and our digital experiences behind us as we walk in through the physical or virtual office door. Really, what we are looking at is, as many organisations are, is how do you use technology to make customers' lives easier and help them make more of their money? And that, for us as a bank, has to be where we're focused. It is not always as straightforward as we would love it to be when you're working for a huge organisation with legacy systems. But it is fundamentally, how does technology enable us to do things simpler, better, safer, so that customers can make more of their money? And that ranges right from the experiences that we have in apps, the experiences that actually our colleagues have with technology in branches when they're dealing with customers, right the way through to some of the stuff that we do in terms of communications delivery and communications optimization, right the way then into as everybody gets very excited about the metaverse, where could we think about doing things? And I thought it was a really interesting thing. I think it was on the Marketing Week around, if somebody, the metaverse and where's the hype versus where's the reality. So another great game of fact or opinion, probably. But actually trying to ground things like, where do we look at future technology in how is that helping us to either create a new experience that's valuable or unlock a problem that a customer has. So I think that's very broadly, what we're trying to do is just say, how does technology help us to deliver better, safer, easier, to enable customers to make more of their money?
Brilliant. I'm turning the conversation back around the thought that you talked around culture, the importance of culture in the organization. And in fact, for you personally, what you said was around, you were really mindful now about who you are working for and with. Yeah. How do you actively go about seeking that out? I mean, how do you figure that out? I mean, so many people will be thinking that's a good thing to do, but like, hey, I'm applying for this job. How am I even in a position to be able to understand what's going on in the internal workings of it?
I think a piece of advice that I would give, and I did this when I moved to HSBC, is that I asked to speak to more people and had conversations with a couple of guys that, like I said, the people who I went through the recruitment process. And as it happened, there was going to be, I knew there was going to be a shift. So the person who was recruiting me was moving over to Hong Kong. And I said, that's all well and good. And I really like you. And we've had some really good chats. And I get the sense of the organization, if somebody like you can be in a really senior position, actually, that, there's some decent folk around. But you're not going to be here. So I want to understand a bit more and talk to others about this. So I had conversations with a couple of other people, both of whom were just, very normal human beings, really good people. But I would really advise people to talk to more people. You are interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing you, and there needs to be a fit. So don't be shy. And ask to come in and meet people, or ask to have a conversation on the phone or something, so to get a sense of how do people see it, how do they feel about it, and how do people behave a little bit. So I would always counsel that, and don't just sort of have an interview with one person and then go, great, I like them, because you never know how long one person's going to be.
It's true.
Yeah. Again, fantastic advice. Now I'm just going to bring back Ambrose McGinn. Showed some belief in you, then the job doubled, then the job doubled again. And for many people who are watching, listening to this, you will find along the way that people will back you, will take a chance on you, will see something in you. So it's times when it feels like your career is unproductive, it will come along. But I want to make the link to mentoring, and obviously the School of Marketing, it's right at the heart of what we do, the Mentoring Gen Z scheme, etc. So I suppose, beyond Ambrose, what role has mentoring played for you, both as a mentor and as a mentee?
As a mentor, it sounds very selfish. I get so much from it when I talk to people that I mentor. I learn from them. I get a massively different perspective of what's happening. And I know when I'm as a mentee, I sometimes have to do that in a talk to myself, when you go, I don't want to take somebody's time, I don't want to impose on them. And then you have to go, but when I'm mentoring somebody, I really value the time and I get so much from it. So kind of, stop the self-talk about I don't want to take people's time. For me, as a mentee, mentoring has been hugely important around confidence and self-belief. I think many of us still have that sort of imposter syndrome, because I haven't come through a very traditional marketing agency, marketing director background. I have a complete imposter syndrome, so I'm not a proper marketeer. And you go, and that's just the creative, but it's almost like we all do that, I think, in certain different ways. So I think mentoring for me has been about more about sometimes navigation of organizations, but more about my personal belief, my personal self-belief, and having that confidence that I can do it. I mean, even the time with Ambrose, to be quite blunt, Ambrose saying you can do it, and I said, I can't, I really can't. And probably people who worked for me at the time just went, no, she can't. but it was so it was a big step, so I think mentoring band, that's been very specific for me. I think it's really important that you have a sense of what you want from a mentor, and that different mentors will give you different things. And whether it's around confidence and self-belief, whether it's about exposure to skills and experience and learning, whether it's around navigation of an organization, whether it's about somebody who's mentoring you who might become your next job. There's very different roles that a mentor can play that sometimes overlaps into a sponsor. But I think it's really, really critical that you as a mentor understand what role you're playing, and your mentee does that as well. Otherwise, it can become a bit meandering. So it needs to be, I think mentoring needs to be quite purposeful in that sense. In terms of mentees, I have mentored. Say my big thing is I have learned so much from them and the perspectives and experiences that they have, I still continue to mentor a number of them inside and outside the organization.
That's awesome. Well, I think the ultimate mentoring, well, potential mentoring relationship is one of being a parent. And I wondered if to that extent, what advice do you currently give your kids, maybe on careers and life and how they should navigate these uncertain times?
So my son's 17, so just doing he's in lower six, so we've just been doing the university rounds and so on. I think, and my daughter's just turned 12. I think the biggest piece of advice I would say is do something that you love, or at least that makes you happy, and that you can enjoy. Don't take yourself too seriously, but work hard. And don't ever believe that something is final and fatal. In terms of, doors shut, doors open. We're going through the whole exam piece at the moment, and people put so much stress on themselves. It's like, I vaguely remember we were fighting dinosaurs at the time, I think, when I did my A levels. But the stress that you put on yourself that goes, if I don't do this right, everything ends. That's not true. All the way through your career, that is not true. Redundancy, it isn't the end. It feels like it at the time. So try and always keep that perspective that, I think you said it earlier, almost, Mark, one door closes, another door opens. It is so true. And to try and hold on to that belief and not pile stress on yourself is super important. So do something you love, and if it's not something you love, make sure it makes you happy. Have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. Work hard. And don't ever believe that something is the end and final and fatal unless you want it to be. That's the advice I'd give them.
In advice, obviously, kids choose what they hear from their parents. So, you can never be a hero to your parents, so it's very hard. But that quote you said, failure is not fatal. If I remember, it's Winston Churchill said, success is not final. Yeah. Failure is not fatal. It's having the courage to continue that counts. And it's a very resonant quote. What fabulous advice again. Just the extension to that is, I think you have great words to motivate and lead. So I want to go on to leadership a little bit, and just to understand your perspectives on leadership. And I suppose quite specifically, where do you think you are strong as a leader? What's your key leadership traits?
I think I try to be scrupulously fair. And that's something that I hold is one of my core values, and therefore so to treat people fairly and with respect. So I think as a leader, I am driven by a desire to do better and be fair, and be fair. I think if you asked my team, they would say that I am very energetic, sometimes tiringly so. That I do move with a lot of pace. That I am fun to be around, but sometimes a bit exhausting, quite demanding, and have a clear view in my mind. Sometimes I won't always be as clear as I could be about getting it out of my mind into somebody else's. But I think what they'd say is that I'm energetic, I'm driven, I have a real desire to do better, and for the team to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. I always think you have to be very, very mindful of everybody has a different sense of what they want to achieve. And I see my job as a leader to expose to people what their potential is, and then help them to understand to what degree they want to pursue that.
And, I think there's an amazing traits and qualities. And I mean, the thought that you started with fairness, and actually, that was a big focal point around your style of leadership. Where does that come from? Where do you feel that, that thought about ruthless fairnessness that's come from within you?
That's a phenomenally good question. I think it has to go back to your upbringing. I think it has to go back to a sense of wanting to have. I didn't have a tough upbringing, but I didn't have a gilded tough upbringing either. I mean, I would say I'm a Yorkshire lass that was the granddaughter of a steelworker in Sheffield and this, that, and the other. So I just think that everybody should have opportunity to achieve what they want to achieve. And I think I was brought up the words of my mum in my ear around, basically, if you can't say something nice, don't say something. But also, the pleases and thank yous cost nothing. And there's a sense of being kind, polite, and fair, treat people with respect. I think if we all could just treat people with kindness, we'd probably be a slightly better place. Which is my sort of world peace kind of comment, but there's something in there in my background around actually opportunity, trying to ensure that there is opportunity for all, and that we treat people with respect is fundamentally something that I hold very tightly to.
That everything you just said there is extremely congruent. Great values, and you can see the origin and therefore the depth and resonance. So we've probably only got a couple of questions left. So I'm keen to understand how you keep developing. So many people I talk to, frustratingly, don't have a personal development plan and think things are going to happen by magic. You've obviously already been very successful, but I suspect there's still lots more to come. So how do you think about your own personal development journey from here?
I try to think about it in the sense of broad direction of where do I want to get to, and therefore where are the strengths that I need to make stronger, and where are the gaps that I need to bridge. So if I sort of look at my kind of my ambitions, what I'd like to do, there is so much that I still want to learn. I think for me there is things around psychology and human behavior that I think I would love to learn more and understand more about. There's a huge amount around technology and data that I feel that I need to understand more about in order to be effective and to be able to help my teams to be effective. And really for me, that is, how do I then fill those gaps? What's the best way of doing it? Is it around doing some form of training course? Is it around doing something, is it around actually sort of going and finding somebody who I can talk to? Is it around reading books? Is it around talking to others and so on? It's really interesting. It's sort of like coming into this role, I reached out to Sophie Devonshire, the Marketing Society, because I think there's so much more that I can learn and my team can learn through the Marketing Society and great marketers around there. And actually, it's one of those little things in my head going, should I go back? Because I didn't do Chartered Institute of Marketing. I haven't done things like that. So to go, should I go back and should I do a Masters in Marketing? Because actually that feels, there's things in my head around, I don't know whether that's my own little, sort of like monkey on my shoulder and your credibility piece, or whether it's because I do look at things and go, there's a lot that's intuitive, but I do kind of look at things and go, perhaps it would be super helpful for me and for my team and for others, for me to have some of the more structured developments around that. So lots of things in my mind around where would I want to be? Where do I see the gaps now? And then what are the options and ways to fill that?
Highly logical in the way that you think about it. I remember when HSBC, they always had a 9-box model, and you just conjured up a memory of the sort of boxes going through your mind around that. Becky, last question then. In fact, I recently saw a study just yesterday that found that advertising and creative jobs are in the decline versus tech jobs, which are tremendously in the increase. And to me, that was actually a monumental shame, because I think, my happy place is in this industry. And I wondered to what extent or what advice you would give somebody who is perhaps on the fence about entering this industry, and whether you would say, or what would you say as to try and fight our cause?
It's another great question. I think that I come back to what we talked about a little bit earlier around creative and creativity. Creativity, you need creativity to be successful in many, many industries and careers. And actually, I think there's a danger when we're technology and advertising. Actually, we should be thinking technology and advertising. So I would go, actually, if you're thinking about a creative career, you need to understand technology. Maybe not as much as if you're going to be a sort of a programmer in Silicon Valley, but you need to have a really good understanding of technology and how you can creatively use technology to create brilliant experiences for customers. And that might then turn into something that is visual, or an experience, or something else. But for me, it's more about being open to being grounded in one industry, in advertising, marketing, but understanding that actually more and more industries are doing this, and therefore being able to adapt and adopt is super, super powerful.
Love it.
Brilliant. My goodness, that went quick. It's now an unenviable job to try and summarize what we've taken out of that. It's been so rich. There's been so many great pieces of advice in there, Becky, but let me just see if I can bring to life what you've talked about. It's been so good. So we started with, you could have been an economist. Their lost is marketing's gain, but clearly you're very commercial, but understand the balance and interaction of commercial and creativity at the heart of everything. Also highly curious, love fact or opinion, but that also came through repeatedly, and your thirst for learning, even now, is it psychology? Is it a master's? So the innate curiosity, which I'm sure has springboarded you many times. Love the way you talk about mentoring. It's a two-way process. You've loved it. You get so much out of it. And particularly as a mentor, the benefit you can give to mentees in terms of confidence and self-belief. But of course, it's not been straight line. You've had some tricky times, some decisions that you maybe would have undone, but you've dealt with them with high integrity. But I think we can all learn from the fact you said, life's too short, so enjoy it. So don't hover too long on the negatives. Your values really shone through when you talked about fairness and respect and your upbringing. My sense is that's sort of you've got a very strong internal compass that guides you through. And then that made me think that, you seem to be very good at keeping things in perspective. If you did watch this back, it's really interesting how you laugh when you talk about difficult things. You maybe didn't notice that, but it really came through, and it's a lovely laugh. When you talked about imposter syndrome. And so there is a lightness of touch, which I think is really powerful, which makes you come across in a very genuine way. But so Rich, I'm going to end on your advice. You said to your kids, do something that you love. If not, makes you happy. Don't take life too seriously and work hard, and failure is not fatal. Becky, it's been tour de force. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. And I know our listeners will too. So thank you. See you, Rich.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Becky.